They told me to leave God's house because my dog might shed 3 hairs. That one sentence rewired everything I thought I knew about faith, community, and the quiet power of standing up for what's right. My name's Frank Brewer, a 70-year-old disabled Marine veteran. George Me Lanky, cinnamon-colored Labradora's been my certified service dog and best friend for the last 9 years. He steadies my balance when the shrapnel scars in my left hip flare, nudges me awake when the nightmares lunge from Vietnam's jungles into my sleep, and somehow keeps the world from feeling so heavy. George is, quite literally, the legs I never fully got back, and the peace I never thought I'd find. Sunday morning, early spring. Pink dogwoods nodded outside the red brick walls of St. Mark's Community Chapel, the same church my mother once scrubbed pews in for extra grocery money. I'd driven George and myself the 12 minutes across town because Pastor Kent was starting a new series on forgiveness. I figured I could always use an extra dose of that medicine. The moment we stepped through the vestibule, an usher with silver hair and a forced smile intercepted us. "Brother Brewer," he whispered, gaze fixed on George's vest. "Service dog access required," by Ada stitched in bright yellow. Pastor was wondering purely housekeeping. "You understand whether you'd consider leaving George at home next week? He, sheds." The cleaning crew's been finding hair on the floor. There's a kind of silence. Veterans recognize the silence right before something detonates. My ears rang with it. George merely sat, tail thumping once, expecting a treat. I felt the old ache spread from my hip straight to my heart. "I cleaned my own hair off that floor," I answered, keeping my voice soft enough not to echo off the stained glass. "But I'll keep your request in prayer." When the service ended, I borrowed a broom from the supply closet, swept exactly 3 golden hairs into a dustpan, and handed them to the usher like defeated soldiers. Then George and I limped out, heads high, hearts dragging. I never went back. Leaving St. Mark's felt like losing a limb all over again. Small towns survive on routine. The barber who remembers the cut you got at 17. The waitress who tops off your mug before you lift it. The church potluck where you're Frank the vet, not Frank the problem. For 47 years, those pews cradled my grief, my marriage vows, my wife Martha's funeral. But dignity has a volume knob, and the usher had cranked it to mute. I spent the next week pacing the porch, George trotting circles, sensing I was wrestling invisible enemies. On Wednesday night, my neighbor Lydia Henson grandmother, retired civil rights lawyer, brought over peach cobbler. "Frank, you look like someone handed you a live grenade," she said. So I told her everything. Lydia didn't blink. "They violated the Americans with Disabilities Act and your basic human decency, sugar." Her drawl sounded like molasses over steel. "The question is, do you want to leave quietly, or teach them why service dogs shed a little something more valuable than hair they shed light?" I'd fought wars so folks could worship freely. Leaving quietly tasted like defeat. Lydia dove into action the way Marines breach doors methodically, decisively. She drafted a cordial letter to Pastor Kent, citing Ada Title III. I, however, wrote a different kind of letter. A memory. Pastor. On April 4, 1971, a dog named Duke pulled me out of a burning Huey. Today his legacy walks beside me, wearing the name George. When you asked me to choose between my faith and my lifeline, you chose for me. For the record, I pick both, and I will not be shamed for it. Respectfully, Frank Brewer. George sealed the envelope with a wet noseprint. We mailed both letters. Friday, silence. Saturday, silence. Sunday, Lydia posted a single photo on social media. George sitting outside the church door below a sign that read, "All are welcome." Her caption, "Except, apparently, the ones who keep us safe." She used the hashtag #LetGeorgeIn. By Monday morning, the town of Millridge, population 14,202, was trending on national veteran forums. By Tuesday, a local reporter asked if I'd be willing to talk on camera. I agreed under 2 conditions. 1, George got chicken treats. 2, no villainizing, we educate, not eviscerate. The segment aired Thursday at 6:30 p.m. It was respectful, heartfelt, and devastating. Phone lines at St. Mark's lit up like a Christmas tree. Donations halted. A longtime choir member whose son uses a seizure-alert dog resigned in tears. Parents of autistic children voiced fury. Pastor Kent scheduled an emergency elders meeting. Meanwhile, George and I couldn't walk down Main Street without strangers offering pats and gratitude. Beautiful but exhausting. Fame is just a brighter spotlight on the scars you already carry. That night I dreamed of the Mekong Delta only instead of mortar fire. I faced a congregation hurling brooms. I woke drenched, George's nose nudging me back to reality. Saturday afternoon, a letter arrived, hand-delivered by the same usher, eyes watery. Brother Brewer, the elders humbly request your presence Wednesday evening to discuss how St. Mark's can become a true house of welcome. George, of course, is invited. Pastor Jacob Kent. I half expected Lydia to throw confetti. She just arched an eyebrow. Go. But don't go small. So we prepared. Lydia printed out ADA guidelines, best practices for congregations, and testimonials from disabled parishioners around the country. I rehearsed my story, not the wounds, but the wonder. How George senses panic attacks before they bloom, how his warm weight across my legs is the difference between 3 a.m. terror and 3 a.m. peace. Wednesday, 6 p.m. The fellowship hall smelled of coffee and tension. 3 folding chairs waited in a semicircle. One for me, one for Pastor Kent, one for George, Lydia insisted. They'd even placed a water bowl with George's name on masking tape. Small, clumsy gesture, yet it knocked loose something inside me. Pastor Kent's voice trembled. Frank, I owe you an apology. We spoke from ignorance, not malice. I took a breath. Sir, ignorance is curable. Let's write the prescription together. For 2 hours, we talked ADA compliance, shed facts. Lydia cited a study proving human hair sheds 6,100 strands daily, dogs average fewer. But mostly, we told stories. Kent shared his fear that church budget couldn't handle specialized cleaning. I countered with volunteer rotas and allergy-friendly seating zones. Near the end, an elder named Miles asked, Frank, what does church feel like when you're told to leave George? I answered, voice cracking. Like being asked to leave a lifeboat because it's dripping water. Silence swallowed the room. Then Pastor Kent stood. Brother Brewer, will you return this Sunday and teach us? Service dogs, PTSD, whatever you feel we need. April 28. Parking lot overflowing. News vans again, this time invited. Inside, a new sign hung. Welcome, all God's creatures and their handlers. A row of children held handmade posters of dogs with halos. George strutted down the aisle like he owned the joint, tail sweeping side to side, shedding pure joy. I addressed the congregation, George at my heel. You didn't just ask me to choose between fur and faith. You asked every veteran, every child with autism, every blind neighbor to do the same. But here's the good news. Redemption isn't a pew you sit in, it's a door you hold open. For 30 minutes I spoke of invisible wounds, of resilience wrapped in fur, of how small Acts 3 hairs. One broom can echo louder than hymns. At the end, Pastor Kent knelt and clipped a tiny brass tag onto George's vest. Honorary Deacon St. Mark's. The sanctuary erupted. Even my nightmares went quiet that night. The story could have ended there, but viral tales sprout roots. Other churches emailed me for guidance. Lydia and I created a modest pamphlet, How to Welcome Service Animals of Every Stripe and Shed. A veterans nonprofit reprinted it nationwide. 6 months later, state legislators debated a bill offering grants for accessibility training in faith communities. George, oblivious, still chases butterflies and steals my socks. I often replay that first conversation with the usher. I wonder how differently things might have gone if I'd swallowed the sting, left my church family, let bitterness settle like dust. But sometimes the universe hands you a broom so you'll learn how to sweep change into motion. If you take nothing else from this story, remember, 1. Dignity isn't negotiable. When someone asks you to compromise on what keeps you whole, that's your cue to stand taller on 2 legs or 4. 2. Ignorance is an invitation. You can slam the door, or you can open it wider and show what lives inside. 3. Small gestures roar. 3 dog hairs and a borrowed broom launched a movement that's still rippling across pews and policy halls. If you're watching this and you rely on a service animal or love someone who do share this video, tag your local faith center, school, restaurant. Offer them the pamphlet link below. Invite questions instead of court cases. Because the next George is already out there, nose pressed to a door that was never meant to be shut. And if you've ever been the usher well-meaning but misinformed today, be your broom in hand moment. Sweep away the fear. Make room for the fur. You'll be amazed what grace looks like when it walks in on 4 paws wearing a vest that says, "Here to serve." St. Mark's kept its promise. 3rd row, left side, there's a space wide enough for a wheelchair and a dog bed. The cushion bears George's paw print in fabric paint, courtesy of the Sunday school kids. Above it hangs a carved wooden plaque. Love one another. Leave no one outside. Every Sunday, I sit there, George at my feet, hymnal in shaky hands, eyes dry for the first time in years. And every Sunday, without fail, the usher, same silver hair, steadier smile, stops by, leans down and whispers, "Good morning, Brother Brewer. Good morning, Deacon George. Welcome home." Because sometimes, all it takes to change the world is 3 hairs, 1 broom, and the courage to come back through the door you were once forced to leave.